In Rise of Kingdoms, there is always one ongoing debate. No matter what time of year it is, no matter what's in the game, the one debate I always hear is what troop type is currently the best. Now, I haven't really spoken about this for quite a while. I think it's been at least 6 to 8 months now since I last spoke about it. And today I'm going to be talking about it. I'm going to be looking at which troop type I currently think is the best in Rise of Kingdoms. So if you want to know which troop type might be the best for you to main right now at the end of 2024 after all the commanders have been released, you want to stick around to the end of the video. Now, as I have done previous, I am going to be looking at the 3 key troop types today. I still don't think it's ready for me to include engineering. They just don't have enough field usage for me to properly give a judgment on where I could rank them. I think they're a powerful troop, but I think they're very niche still. So leadership, integration, and engineering, those 3 troop types, I'm not going to really look at them too much. They're quite niche. They're quite specific, if anything, and they're not something that I personally have enough knowledge to really put in a proper ranking. But the other 3 main troop types, infantry, archers, and cavalry, I will be giving a pretty good look at. Starting off, we're going to go over the commander strength for each troop type, and we'll start off with the Cavs. Cavalry's commander strength right now, it's very lackluster. I've been saying it over the past couple of videos. They haven't got much love recently, if we're being fully realistic. Majority of the current commanders, if we look at the best 3 March mutable, they're majority single target. You've got Nevsky with Joan. It's a solid March, but Nevsky's starting to be a bit outdated, and Joan's AoE, it's been beat by other commanders. Like, it's just as simple as that. Now, it's still good, but when we look at some other troop types, it's definitely not going to be the strongest. Then you've got Hao Bing with Belisarius Prime. Very, very solid March, but it's all single target damage, and that's obviously going to be a little bit of an issue. And then moving into 3 marches for cavalry, it gets really weird. You can do something like Hao Bing with a William, and then Nevsky with Joan, and then like Zhang Yu with Belisarius, but it's extremely weird, and it doesn't work too well. So when you look at the cavalry mutable right now, it's not the most amazing. The biggest thing that's lacking for Cavs right now is their lack of AoE. If you look at the best 2 marches even, Nevsky, Joan, Hao Bing with Belisarius, there's just not much going on there in terms of AoE. You've only got Joan, or you could use William in place of Belisarius, but his AoE is really outdated. I mean, 3 targets, 1500 damage, not even close to some of the more meta commanders we do see nowadays. So when it comes down to it, I don't think I can say confidently that cavalry commanders are in the best spot. I think that Nevsky is extremely outdated nowadays. Like, he's not super outdated, but he's around the same outdatedness of, let's say, Boudica Prime. He's starting to fall off, especially against a lot of the newer commanders that are being released, and you're going to notice that he's only going to get weaker. I mean, they're not going to be buffing him anytime soon, and while everyone does say, yeah, he's still a good commander, I can agree to the fact that he's still decent. He isn't meta-breaking level like he used to be, and the cavalry right now don't have a real meta-breaking commander. Their most recent release was Belisarius Prime, and if we're being honest, unless you're running 5 marches, he's pretty meh. So the Cav commanders right now, not in the hottest position. They definitely have been in a better spot before. Next up, I'm going to go over the Archer commanders. And Archers are in a bit of an okay spot right now, even though it is a little bit confusing. The best 3 March mutable right now for Archers is Zhulang with Herman Prime. It's a really, really solid March. Shajar with YSG, you can also run Shajar with Nebu, and then Boudica with Ashurbanipal. In my opinion, this is the best 3 March mutable at the moment, and the one thing the Archer Ball really does have going for it, there is a very good amount of AoE. Zhulang, Herman, YSG, Ashurbanipal, and Nebu, any of those commanders that you run, all 5 of them will have some form of AoE, and then the only real single targets are Shajar and Boudica Prime. Then they're still very solid single target commanders. The only problem is when you move to that 3rd March, Boudica is definitely quite outdated nowadays. Skill damage increase, it's nice for your ball, but it doesn't really help Shajar as much if you're going to run her as a secondary, which I wouldn't recommend, obviously, but if you do it, it's not going to help her. And if you have any infantry marches, it's also not going to do much. So Boudica starting to see a bit of outdatedness in terms of her debuffs. Her buffs, like her own self-boosts, they're not that amazing now. She's still got good stats, but they're just not crazy level. And her fort skill and expertise have definitely lost a lot of value. The fact she can get rid of a control effect doesn't do much because Guan is not absolute meta right now. So Boudica, she is a pretty meh commander. Another thing to note with Archer commanders, investment-wise, kind of tough to say which are the best investments. I personally think Shajar is a really good investment just because I think we're going to get a lot of mighty healing commanders. But in terms of other commanders like Zulang and Herman, if we see Mighty Heal, they could become a lot weaker, which makes me say, should you really invest in them? Also, Herman Prime, he's taken a bit of a hit to his effectiveness, again, with the rise of Smite commanders, and also just the introduction of Mighty Healing, what it could mean for archers, I would say does impact Herman a little bit. Now, that being said, the Archer meta is really respectable right now. There's no real glaring flaws. Maybe there's a little bit of a lack of single target meta. There's not as much single target damage as you'd want, and I'd made a video before on why I think single target is still good for Murderball. But I mean, it's a 2 to 4 ratio. It's not that bad for the Murderball, and overall, I do think it is relatively decent. So Archers right now, pretty solid Murderball. But when it comes down to our final troop type, the Infantry Murderball, they've probably got the best one at the moment. The best 3 marchers for Infantry. I mean, Ragnar or CPO Primary, Ragnar Secondary is a really, really good march. It's a double AoE beast. There's a ton of stats in it. Ragnar, who I'm still standing on, is not the most tanky infantry commander. Really pairs well with CPO, who's a little bit more tanky. Now, Ragnar's got a lot of tankiness in his kit. He's got the 40% defense. He's got the 10% normal damage reduction, but he's not the most ridiculously tanky. I mean, he's got the tankiness, but he's not crazy tanky. He pairs really well with CPO, though, who's kind of crazy tanky. CPO's got a good amount of health. CPO's got his own self-shields and damage reductions. So overall, CPO is a very, very tanky commander. They pair well. Ragnar does bring a lot of DPS to that march. He's got very, very solid AoE. And CPO brings one of the best debuffs in the game with that 30% health to 3 targets. So it's a really, really good Murderball. Definitely, sorry, a really, really good first march. Definitely up there with some of the strongest. Then you've got William Wallace with Leo Chair. Again, this is a really, really solid march. It's arguably the strongest march in the game, maybe only secondary to Ragnar with CPO, just because Ragnar CPO is that overpowered. You've also got Alex with Leo Chair, again, another really solid march as well. So you can just see Infantry, they've got a really all-round Murderball at the moment. The third march for Infantry is probably where it lacks the most, though. Infantry have 2 really meta marches. I'd say the top 2 marches, absolute meta. The third march, it's kind of meh. I mean, when you look at the third march, you're probably looking at something like a CPO Emilianus with like a Gorgo, or something like a Tarek with a Sargon, or a Guan with a CPO, and then Ragnar with someone else. It does get a little bit messy, so I'm not the biggest fan of the third infantry march, but then again, most people only run 2 marches on the open field, so this isn't a very big issue for infantry, which is why I still think that they've got a really, really formidable Murderball. That being said, CPO with Gorgo, or Gorgo Primary, CPO Secondary, it's a really, really good march as well. I don't think it's meta level, mainly because it's got 2 single target commanders, but it is a very, very powerful march. So, Infantry, their first 2 marches, absolutely game-breaking. Third march gets a bit iffy as to who you would pick to make a proper Murderball. That's where it gets to like the point where it's like, I don't know if they're overpowered enough or powerful enough to really hold their own in the open field. So overall, in the first category, I like to look at like 2 to 3 categories. The first category, rank 1, I'm going to give the commanders to infantry. Even though infantry have a very lacking third march, it's not a very big deal in the grand scheme of a Murderball. Their Murderball is really meta right now. They're very up to date. They've got their own Smite commanders. Ragnar has definitely brought back CPO in the current meta, and it's a very, very formidable ball. It's strong. It's got good debuffs all around. It's got good damage. It's just the perfect Murderball at the moment, especially in the current meta. Arguably, you could say archers could fight for the first place, mainly because they've got 3 very solid marchers. Shajara isn't as game-breaking as Ragnar, though. She's good. A lot of people say she's bad. From personal experience, I think she's pretty decent. And the rest of the Archer Ball is all-round pretty decent as well. Zulang with Herman is still a very good march. I have noticed it's not as strong as it used to be for me, but maybe that's just because I'm playing a little bit worse, or maybe I had a harder KVK, whatever it may be. But overall, the Archer Murderball is a solid, fairly good all-rounder. It works pretty well in the current meta, and I would say it's worthy of a second place. It could fight for a first place, depending on your playstyle, depending on if you want 3 marches of one troop type. But for the first 2 marches, it's not as groundbreaking as the infantry march. The first 2 infantry marches, absolutely crazy level. First 2 archer marches, they're good, but they're definitely not at that infantry level. Finally, I'm going to give last place to Cavs. I know Cavalry have a good ball. I don't think it's that abysmal. I mean, all the troops are relatively close. It's just Cavalry Murderball is a little bit behind the other troop types. Nevsky's not as meta, and he's definitely within the top best march for Cavs. Hauche Bing is not the most crazy commander. Jones AoE is just a little bit outdone nowadays, and Belisarius Prime, we don't really want him in the game. So there isn't nothing too crazy with the Cav ball for me to give it that rank 1. It doesn't get the meta stats. It doesn't have any meta new abilities like the Infantry ball. It doesn't have any random commanders that showed up out of nowhere that do crazy AoE damage like Ragnar. It is just a decent murder ball. The Cavs, I'm not saying you can't trade good with them just because they have the worst murder ball. They're just not at that groundbreaking level that some of the other troops are at right now. The next thing to talk about when it comes down to deciding the current best troop type is the best one to train. And the way that I think training troops works is you've got 2 goals with them: kill them off and kill them off. So whenever you train troops, you just want to get them killed in a garrison or a rally, and you can't do that if the troop is not garrison or rally meta. So there is something we should note. First of all, the current rally meta, to my knowledge, is actually going to be infantry. Infantry are a really solid rally meta right now. But if you're not in KVK at the moment and you're working towards a KVK, we may see new cavalry by the time that happens. This is because the most recent cavalry release was Eleanor, and she is a garrison commander, and generally we see 1 rally, 1 garrison, and it just cycles like that. Rally, garrison, rally, garrison, rally, garrison, which means Cavs are probably going to get a rally meta, sorry. They're obviously not garrison meta right now. They're obviously not rally meta either. I just think that they're going to see some really good rally, probably something really good with Justinian, to counter the current meta, which is archers. Archers are currently the meta garrison, I would say. CY is pretty formidable. I mean, you can still run other garrisons. I mean, infantry are a solid garrison, especially when it comes down to Gorgo. Gorgo with pretty much any Heraclius pairing is going to be very good. Gorgo with a lot of infantry garrisons is also really nice. But I know CY is also a relatively decent garrison, especially if you want to keep a point. He's got a lot of healing, which is nice, and that means you're going to see him used a lot when it comes down to your big fights. If you want to hold a pass, you're probably going to use CY or you're going to use Eleanor, which is just kind of interesting to see. So I think right now, in terms of training troops, we're kind of looking at moving towards either training cavalry for their upcoming rally meta, at least that's a prediction, so if you want to predict that and you train the Cavs, that is good, or training archers for their garrison and also current fairly good rally meta. So right now, I think archers and cavalry are the best to train. If you're looking to use extra training, maybe you want to win an MGE, maybe you're looking to win something such as even, let's say, a Zenith of Power if one comes around, or your pre-KVK events, you want to try and win that, you can definitely go through and train up some extra archers and train up some extra cavalry. I would still have some infantry on standby, but I would say at least I prefer personally to focus in a bit more on archers and a bit more on cavalry, because they will most likely be the upcoming meta for your KVKs in terms of troops that you can kill really easily. Of course, if you use infantry, you can still put them in garrisons and stuff. You just may see less infantry garrisons, as they're not absolute meta right now. They're still good, but they're just not absolutely crazy in terms of the garrison and rally meta, which kind of hits their effectiveness just a little bit. The final thing I am going to talk about today is the future possibilities of each troop type. Which one do I think is going to see the most over the upcoming year, and which one do I think is going to see a little bit of a downgrade? To start off though, I will say I think engineering have a lot of potential in the upcoming year. I think they're going to be pushed a little bit. They're getting their civilization. I don't know too much about it, but I know we're getting a Mayan civilization that is going to have some focus on siege units. So overall, I think Siege are going to have the biggest year this year. But besides that kind of niche troop type still, we are going to be looking at the main 3. And I think for Cavalry have a lot of potential in the upcoming year. Cavalry are so in a poor position right now that if they don't see a crazy commander release, I will be very surprised. My current prediction for 2025, it's going to be the year of the Cavs. We're going to see rise in cavalry usage again, better cavalry marches, and again, we're going to see a more cavalry meta. We're going to see some crazy trades with some brand new commander, probably who does AoE. So Cavs, I think there's going to be a good release for those troops. Whether it be someone who does a new type of damage, whether it be some completely new mechanic, or just some same old good DPS, solid AoE, would definitely help Cavs and take them a long way. So I think Cavs are due for a very big commander release, something that's going to push them a little bit further into the meta than where they are currently. So Cavalry, right now, I think have the most future potential. The next troop type I'll talk about is Archers. Archers have a fair amount of future potential. It kind of is a bit up in the air though, whether Lilith decides to take the path where they go for skill damage or the path where they go for healing is yet to be seen. So we have to kind of wait and see where Lilith takes Archers over the upcoming years. Will they end up going down into the mighty healing path? Will they end up just continuing down the skill road? Or will they do both, like kind of what they did for infantry with Ragnar? Will they just do a little bit of either one? There's definitely a possibility for all those It is just kind of down to the upcoming year, but I do think either way, archers are in for a little bit of a treat. Infantry, however, they're probably going to get the last rank for this. I think infantry right now are so strong, I'd be surprised if they get another really good commander. Maybe they see something decent enough to give them a solid third march over Scipio with Gorgo or Tarek with Sargon or some weird Alex mix. They're probably going to see something relatively average though. I think infantry will get a commander around the power level of Belisarius Prime. Just because right now, they are so meta dominant, they are so strong compared to the other troop types in their commanders, it only makes sense if they did get given something like that. So I don't think infantry will get a crazy year this year. Maybe Lilith does follow through though with a trend of giving infantry really good commanders, but to be honest, I'd highly doubt they'd do that, and I don't really see the reason behind it. Why would you want to make a troop type that's already ridiculously strong even stronger? I am not 100% sure. So I see cavalry, a lot of potential this year. Infantry, I'm just not 100% sure. We'd have to go and see what happens over the course of the year. So the final results, in my opinion, for the best troop type, I think I will still give it to infantry. Even though they're not the meta to train and they're not the meta investment type, as in they may not see the most growth over 2025, I still think that infantry are so ridiculously strong right now, they're not really going to get that much weaker over the course of the upcoming year. The amount of strength within the top 2 infantry marches is just absurd to the point where it's like, if they did manage to get knocked down to such a weak point where they reach the level of cavalry right now, I'd be very, very surprised. I think the infantry commanders are just so powerful, it would not make sense for them to get any lower than this level. Ragnar is super good with Scipio, even Guan can still work with Scipio, which is just crazy to say in 2024, going to 2025, and then William Wallace with Leo Che is just a crazy meta march. So I don't see anything besides maybe the Archer release towards the end of 2025, that could even damage the power of infantry right now to a really high level. They're meant to counter Cavs, and Cavs will probably get the biggest upgrade over the course of the year, so I could see them still being able to hold their own in the field, especially if Archers don't get anything too crazy. In second place, I feel like you could have kind of guessed it, Archers will go over Cavalry in my opinion. Relatively good to train, much better commanders, and they also have some solid potential over the coming years. So I think Archers, they're worthy of the second place spot, just a bit under infantry in my opinion. I think Archers are an okay contender for first, but they're just not at the power level of infantry right now. I still do think infantry are the best. And then in last place, probably for the first time in years, I'm going to give it to Cavalry. I think Cavalry right now, they need a bit of a boost, they need a bit of an upgrade. I'm sure all Cav mains can agree with me on this. While I'm sure everyone still gets good trades with Cavs because nothing is that unbalanced right now, all the troops are relatively balanced. Cavs are just that little bit behind. They're just the touch behind all the other troop types for me to say that they're not going to be the absolute meta for a little bit. Maybe after the upcoming commander release, the list or the ranking will change. But as of right now, with no new cavalry commanders, I do think they're a tad behind the meta, and we'll have to see what happens over the course of next year. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I want to ask you guys for a small favor, and that is, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Right now, not many of you people are subscribing, and of course, I mean, subscribing is completely up to you, but it does help me and supports making these videos. If you want to see more videos about anything Commander related in Rise of Kingdoms, anything news related, even my KVKs, even when I migrate, you definitely do want to subscribe to the channel. So definitely consider subscribing, completely free, takes 2 seconds, and it really does support me. Other than that, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.